on the 9th of November, 2021. It is 6 o'clock. And so with that, we will move directly into our work session topic this evening, Proactive Rental Inspection Program, and that will be a presentation. And so we'll call on Planning Director Heather Richards to introduce the topic. Welcome everyone again, and Heather, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. I want to introduce Claudia Martinez, who's our code compliance, one of our code compliance officers. She and I will be presenting this as a tag team for you, but tonight we wanted to bring to you the recommendation that has come out of a year-long process with a volunteer committee to look at a proactive rental housing inspection program. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm hoping you can see the slideshow presentation now.
It was up, Heather. It's a black.
Now it's a black box, isn't it?
Yep. There we go.
Oh my goodness.
Looks great.
My computer's working great, as you can see. Okay, maybe that will work. Nope. Okay, I'm gonna set it up again because something's spastic in here. My apologies. It's always the driver and not the actual equipment, I'm sure. Okay, now you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so tonight we want to provide that recommendation from the Rental Housing Inspection Program Committee, and then we are looking to receive some direction from you as City Council on how to move forward with this topic. So this meets the City Council goal of engagement and inclusion, which is to create a culture of acceptance and mutual respect that acknowledges differences and strives for equity. The strategic objective for that is to actively protect people from discrimination and harassment.
Heather, may I just ask, somebody's not on mute and their talking's coming through. So make sure you're on mute if you're not presenting. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, thank you. So some background on this is on July 28th of 2020, you as the City Council adopted ordinance number 5093. And if you remember, that was amending Title 15 of our code and did a pretty comprehensive amendment of it. We titled that Buildings and Construction. That's when we came in with a bunch of codes that we felt that you should adopt as a city for us to implement. Part of that was adding section 15.02.020 subsection H, and that adopted the International Property Maintenance Code, which we call the IPMC. Why that's important is because it established a minimum standard of safety for habitability of residential and commercial structures in Mcminnville. So we now have this sort of baseline minimum standard of what is considered safe and habitable for structures in our community, and it's based on the International Code Council. So it's a fairly common code used across the United States. We folded it into our code compliance program. So what that means is it's now something that's implemented by our code compliance team. Both of our code compliance officers became IPMC certified. So that means they trained on the code, how to implement it and pass the test to get their certifications for it. And that set up what we call a complaint-based program. So if somebody has a complaint about their living situation and they think it's substandard, they can call our code compliance team and they will go in and do an inspection based on this minimum standard established in the IPMC and move that forward towards compliance. So at that time, City Council asked us if there was a way to have a proactive program, so not just a complaint-based one, but a proactive one, due to the fact that we as a city have received some complaints regarding the condition of some rentals in the community, but the tenants did not want to go on the record complaining about their rental unit for fear of retaliation from their landlord. And that was becoming more and more critical as housing supply was getting more and more constrained. So in August of 2021, we did a work session with City Council on proactive rental housing inspection programs. And here are some of the slides from that. From that work session, we talked about what the purpose is, and the purpose of a proactive program is to address the issue of substandard rental properties, promote greater compliance with health and safety standards, and preserve the quality of Mcminnville neighborhoods and available housing. It works by establishing that minimum standard. If the tenant has a problem, they can call and we will inspect it. If the tenant and the co-compliance team will work with the landlord to bring it into compliance. There is a national publication on how to put proactive rental inspection programs together, and we talked a little bit about that. And we brought to you what we felt was the difference between proactive and reactive. So proactive means we are by lottery selecting apartment units that we will proactively go in and inspect for that minimum standard of habitability. And we walked through what that meant. The advantages of the proactive program is it preserves safe and healthy rental housing and takes the burden off of the tenant. And so for those tenants who fear retaliation, they don't need to feel like they have to call in to complain. If the city's doing it proactively, presumably we will eventually be looking at that rental unit and we'll see the substandards ourselves. It protects the most vulnerable tenants. So often people aren't comfortable complaining to a government agency if there are language barriers or if they have disabilities that create that make them feel anxious about making that phone call to a government agency. And then again, proactive programs may preserve neighborhood property values. We walked through what's on an inspection program. We talked about the fact that it really is a maintenance standard. So it's looking at things like heating and plumbing, security of the units, electrical provisions, appliances, smoke detection, structural integrity, weatherproofing, whether there's carbon monoxide alarms, and whether there's rodent issues. So very basic standards. We also shared with you that we looked at a couple other communities who had these types of programs. We brought to you in more detail the program that's in Gresham. Gresham has had their program, a proactive program, since 2007. It took them a year to develop it, so they worked through it very intentionally and deliberately with their community. And it's become a model for other communities, both in Oregon and nationally. It focuses on health hazards, fire and life safety, and protection from the elements. It uses the IPMC as their basic minimum standard. And they have a hybrid of both a complaint program and a proactive program. To implement a successful rental inspection program, what we learned was that the strategies for success that involved gathering a diverse group of stakeholders to design the program in advance, provide training for the code enforcement staff, provide education, outreach, and ongoing support for landlords and tenants, and then implement complementary programs, so funding assistance for low-income landlords or public access to code violation information, things of that nature. So our recommendation that night, this is about a year ago now, was to work towards developing a program similar to Gresham, where we have both a complaint-based program and a proactive program, but with a random sampling, and so that it's, and the random sampling meaning we don't have a goal of getting to every rental unit in Mcminnville, but we want to do samples so that we're able to see what's happening out in the rental community. And do it with consistency and transparency, work with rental property owners over the next year on developing that program, so put together a group of stakeholders, and then implement the program in 2022. So based on that, you provided us direction to move forward with that recommendation. And the first thing we did was we went out and solicited applications for the committee of stakeholders. And we advertised it in the News Register, we advertised it on social media, and we advertised it in the Housing Authority newsletter that goes to all of their tenants. Our goal was to get both landlords and tenants involved in the committee, and to get committee members representing marginalized populations. We think we succeeded in both tenants and landlords. I'm not sure that we really had great representation in terms of marginalized populations in our community. But the committee members are what you see there: Andrew Burton, Joan Drapkin, Diane Longacre, Catherine Martin, Sal Peralta served on it as the city council liaison, Mary Piper, and Vicki Weibargen. That committee met regularly for 8 months to discuss options for the city council to consider, and they voted at their last meeting on October 26th of 2021 to bring this recommendation to you as the city council. So their recommendation in a nutshell is to establish a 5-year pilot program. So there was a lot of discussion in the committee as to whether there actually is need. So are people being exploited? The premise of a proactive program is people are being exploited with rental units, and they don't feel that they have the ability to reach out and get help in that regard. And so the first question was, does that exist in Mcminnville? Do we have any data? And we don't have any data because we haven't had a program. So we just discussed that at length and decided that what we really need to do is think of this as a pilot program rather than establishing a structural program to launch immediately. And with that, we talked about, let's do it in such a way that we can fold it into our existing capacity. Let's not worry about setting up a fee program for this. There was a lot of concern from some partners in the community about doing some sort of fee-based program. Let's not set up a registry at this point in time. Let's do it in such a way where we can use our existing capacity and collect the data. And with that, after doing some analysis, we feel our existing capacity will be able to do 50 to 100 inspections a year in a proactive way. And then after 5 years, we would come back to City Council and evaluate the program based on the data we're collecting to see if there are issues that we're seeing proactively out there, and then decide if we want to move into a larger structural program. The committee also recommends that the inspections be based on the IPMC, which have very clear and objective standards, so leave it at that, and that there needs to be a notification process, and that the notification process should be the same sort of 21-day time frame that we use for our other code compliance programs, so that it fits neatly into the system that we already have established. So I think it's important to understand the data in Mcminnville as we talk through what this program means and does not mean in terms of the recommendation and how to move this forward. So in Mcminnville, with our housing mix, we pretty much have sustained a 60-40 ratio, which is what most communities are looking for. So what that means is 60% of household units are owner occupied and 40% of household units are rentals. We have a total of 13,500 housing units in Mcminnville. And so what that means, of those, we have about 5,400 rentals in Mcminnville. So if you think about what we're suggesting for the pilot program is we're really only going to be looking at 50 to 100 units per year. Over 5 years, we'll get to a maximum of 500. So it's not a huge sample, but it is a sample that we can fold in without having to institute a structural fee system to support it. Roughly 29% of our rentals are detached single-family dwelling units. 13% of them are attached single-family dwelling units, so townhomes, and 58% are multifamily units. The way we're going to get the data for how we're going to create the sample is we're going to work with the Yamhill County Assessor's Office, who has identified multifamily products. So those products that have more than one housing unit in them as a tax code. And so we're going to be using that for our sampling. So we will not be able to we'll work with the Yamhill County Assessor's Office to see if we can do this, but I'm not sure we'll be able to do it in a really scientific way to get the detached single family dwelling units that are in the rentals. One of the things we discussed was looking for those properties where the property owner does not live on the property and using that as a sampling for the detached single-family dwelling unit. So we'll continue to work through those issues if you decide that you want to move forward with this program, how to sort of create a database that feels that it's representative and it's fully supported by the science that this is a database of our multifamily products in Mcminnville without having to go through a registry program. In terms of the makeup of our demographics, most of Mcminnville is white. About 23% of our households are Hispanic. Then we have Asian at a little less than 2% and Black at about 1%. So with that said, our largest minority population is Hispanic. 18% of our households do not speak English at home, so that's the language barrier in terms of reaching out to a government agency. And this shows how the percent of population that's Hispanic or Latino in Mcminnville relative to 2000 and 2016. So the growth of that population demographic, which we expect will continue to grow as well. We also have an aging population, and so a lot of our seniors are in fixed incomes. Again, another reason where someone might feel that retaliation will put them in a vulnerable position if they lose their housing, especially in a market where we're seeing housing rental prices go up every year. So this shows the expected growth of the age of our population over 65. From 2020 to 2030 and 2045. So this is all fairly intuitive. It's the boomer population aging. And so what it means also, though, is the census data collects data for people under the age of 65 with disabilities. So in Mcminnville, that's 12% of our population. And then the presumption is that persons over the age of 65, which is approximately 19% of our population, also eventually will have disabilities in terms of mobility challenges. Another barrier for housing. And so because access to ADA accessible housing is fairly limited, again, another reason why someone would feel very protective of their current housing situation and fear of losing it in terms of retaliation. The other thing going on in Mcminnville is cost-burdened housing. So this is when someone's paying more than 30% of their household income to their housing costs. 25% of our homeowners are cost burdened, and so that means we have a little over 2,000 housing units where people are in a cost burden situation. So spending more on their housing costs than they really should in terms of affordability. And then over half of our renters are in this position as well. So that's 2,800 of our housing units. And this shows those who are in severe cost burden situations where they're paying up to 50% of their household, of their income on housing. So that puts them in vulnerable positions. We also have 588 of our housing units are government assisted. So that's kind of the data of what we're working with, of who's living in our rental units and where we feel that having a proactive program is important to launch as a pilot program to see if there are people who are in marginalized situations being exploited in the housing rental industry in Mcminnville. We also have talked about the need that it will be important to market this program, get the information out to both tenants and landlords so that everyone understands what the program is. And so we've started drafting some of those marketing materials and we've provided them to you in your packet this evening. That strive to be fairly simple as to what we're trying to achieve. These will be provided in both Spanish and English, and it talks about how there is a complaint-based program as well as a city-initiated program. In terms of the inspection notification process, the committee felt it was really important to make sure we have adequate due process for both the tenant and the landlord. So what that means is they get notification well in advance to prepare for an inspection. So that's why we dropped it into our 21-day program. Our co-compliance program works on a 21-day noticing to compliance timeframe. So we would send out a letter 21 days in advance to both the landlord and the tenant, letting them know they've been selected for this proactive inspection program. Included in those mailings will be a form that they can fill out, which it says that they agree to the inspection or they decline it. Both the landlord and the tenant have the opportunity to do so. And if they decline it, we will not advance forward with the inspection unless we feel we should be doing that through another type of program in terms of achieving a warrant to get into the property. Then 10 days prior to the inspection, we again will let people know that the inspection's coming up. We'll go out and notify the notices on the unit itself and notices to the owner to let them know. And also we will require the tenant to provide us with who's going to be on site during the inspection. And it will need to be somebody over the age of 18 who will be on site as we inspect the property. If the owner wants to be part of the inspection, they need to provide the tenant their own 24-hour notice per state law that they will be entering the unit. So they'll need to follow that. Then we'll perform the inspection, and then based on the inspection, if we find that there are some things that need to be brought into compliance, we will then send that to the landlord and work with the landlord to bring those issues into compliance. If there are things that we feel are immediate safety issues, we'll ask that to immediately comply. Excuse me. And those things that will take some time, we'll work through code compliance plan. Sorry. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about the inspection checklist. The committee felt that worked through this diligently and thoughtfully. They really wanted to make sure that the standards were clear and objective, so both the inspector and the tenant and the landlord all knew what was expected of them, and that we were working through the issues that really are sort of the base standards. And so I'm going to turn it over to Claudia to share with you this discussion.
Thank you, Heather. Like Heather was saying, we discussed the items that should be inspected during an inspection at a rental unit. And so we went over and studied the IPMC book in detail, just to make sure we had all the items covered, and we were inspecting all the rental houses equally. And we didn't miss crucial items that need to be inspected per the maintenance book. And a few items here, give me just a second, would be, we would be inspecting the interior of the units and the exteriors as well. The items that would be inspected, for example, would be each sleeping room, and they would have to have operable smoke detectors. They would have egress, exit to the room. Windows would be required. All the items that are covered as here in the kitchen, we would look at the items on this inspection detail sheet as well. We want to make sure that the kitchen has running water, and it can heat up to 120 degrees. The kitchen sink is properly connected to sanitary sewer. Any repairs that might have been done to correct any leaks or have been properly repaired. As well as appliances that are in good working condition. And then we would move along to the bathrooms. We would make sure that all the tubs, the showers are installed properly and they're in good repair. There's light fixtures that are required. The bathroom cabinets are in good repair as well. No leaking faucets. Hot and cold running water would be required in each bathroom. We would be taking a close look at the walls and the ceilings as well. We would make sure that there's no loose wallpaper, there's no flaking, and if the unit, of course, is older than 1978, we would make sure that the paint isn't damaged and it's not lead-based paint. It's free from holes, water damage, and the ceiling height has to be at least 7 feet. We observe the floors as well. They have to be in good repair, structurally sound, without holes, no trip hazards. For example, a torn carpet, and the hallway there has to be clear pathway, handrails. There has to be continuous guardrails that are required on open sides of landing stairways. The windows would have to be easily openable, and the windows, of course, they apply to all the windows in the unit. It needs to be able to be locked properly. And then we would look at the doors. We would make sure that you can safely secure them. They have the proper hardware, locks, etc. They are weather tight and rodent proof. Storm screen doors, they need to be maintained in good functioning with closers. And of course, we would take a look at the fire protection. We would make sure that certain items that could be combustible or flammable be stored properly and away from any furnaces or water heaters. We would make sure, if there's third floor units, they would require a second means of egress as well. All stairways would require continuous handrails. Buildings with 3 or more units, it would require fire extinguishers. And all these items are covered in the IPMC book, and that sets the standard of a properly maintained unit and safe. And so all these items that I'm covering here, they are on that book. And so if there's some items that don't really make sense, or there's more clarification needed, we would use the PMC booklet to verify what type of repairs would need to be done and how they need to be corrected. So that would be kind of our guidebook when it came to deciding what needs to be fixed. If it needs to be fixed, how is it going to be fixed?
So the other committee, I'm sorry, Claudia.
No, go ahead.
Okay. The other committee concerns was that they wanted to make sure that the civil rights and due process were being honored for both the tenant and the landlords. I talked to you about the notification and making sure there's ample notification, there's opportunity to decline the inspection. And then they also talked about safety measures that to make sure that the code compliance officers who are entering these housing units are safe when they're entering them. And so there was some, just because we are doing a random sampling, there was discussion about running a background check on the tenants. And we'll be working with the police department on how to do that. That the officer is trained to leave and feels empowered to leave when they feel unsafe. And then also to establish COVID protection regulations. We are also working on developing safety protocols as a standard operating procedure for our code compliance team at this time. So going back to the strategies for success in terms of how this program evolved, because if you recall, and I didn't talk about that this much tonight, but when we first brought the program to you a year ago, and we're looking at other cities that have implemented it, it was based on having a database and a registry, so licensing program. People who had multifamily units had to license with the city, and that created the database. There was a fee associated with that, and that financed the program. And the amount of rentals that were being inspected were considerably more than what we're recommending to you tonight. And so what has evolved from this discussion is a little bit different than what other communities have done. And that's because we are coming forward with a pilot program based on after the discussions of the rental inspection committee and the concerns that they had. So, but measuring against those strategies for success, we measure very well, even with this sort of different approach. So we did involve diverse stakeholders in designing the program. There was a lot of diverse opinions on the committee, and they worked through those respectfully with each other and got to this place of recommending the pilot program. We have provided training for our code enforcement staff, and we will continue to do so. One of the goals of this program is to provide education, outreach, and ongoing support for landlords and tenants. So what are landlord rights and tenant rights? And we'll continue to put together educational materials for that. What we don't have is any resources to implement complementary programs. So funding resources to help with funding assistance for low-income landlords to come into compliance, or a database where we will have public access to the code violation information. But the top three we are able to achieve with this recommendation for a pilot program. So in terms of next steps, if City Council decides to move forward with this recommendation from the committee, what we would do is develop code provisions to support the program and bring that back to you for consideration. We'll need to bring some code amendments into the Mcminnville Municipal Code that authorizes the program. And we would try to strive to do that in December, at your December 14th meeting or at your first meeting in January. We'd like to, we'll draft it in December, and then we'll bring the amendments to you in January, because we do want to advertise the proposed code amendments and the program. And the fact that they'll be considered at a city council meeting so that people can participate in that if they choose to do so. So that's why we're targeting January for that. If adopted, then what we're going to do is work with the Yamhill County Assessor's Office and sort of clean up that property owner database so that we can get to a place where we feel confident with it. And we'll work in the month of February with the Assessor's Office to do so. In the month of March, we'll develop all the appropriate forms and collateral that we will need to launch the program. And then in April and May, we'll send out a mailing to everyone on the database to inform them of the proposed code changes and the program so that everyone's aware of it. And then we'll select our first round of apartments to inspect in June and do our first inspection starting in July. So there's still about 6 months of work to prop up the program if the City Council wants to move forward with it. So that is our presentation about the recommendations from the Rental Housing Committee to you as the City Council.
Thank you, Heather and Claudia. Let's go ahead and ask specific questions from Council to our presenters. And Council President Drabkin, I see you have your hand up, and then Councilor Chenoweth, you're second. So go ahead, Remy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Heather and Claudia, for the presentation and the information. So my question is based around the data collection and the relevance of the data that would come out of the 5-year program. If you're saying we have about 5,400 rentals, but that's not inclusive of detached single family, and we can do 50 to 100 a year. That means if we gained no more rentals, we would be surveying, if you will, still less than 10% of total rentals, and really we know the numbers down from that. So my question is, what in 5 years, when we say we're collecting data, would how good is that data based on such a small sampling, as opposed to say, we'd like to run a pilot program for 5 years, we're able to do about this many units, and we'll bring you back the results, but with the sampling size being so small and smaller than what we know is in reality, I'm concerned if we're going to try to extract too much from said, quote unquote data, when that data doesn't meet even a 10% marker over 5 years without growth. And hopefully, no, I said that 3 different ways. I'm sorry, but trying to get my thought out.
This was a conversation we met for 8 months, and for 3 months we spent a lot of time talking about data. So the committee was comprised of landlords and tenants, and so people came from it with different perspectives. And there were concerns from some of the from some of the committee members who move forward with the program when we don't know that an issue actually exists, and to move forward with a program that has a fee associated with it. And so, and that was evenly divided across the committee. And so, to be able to get to a place where we felt that we can move forward with something in terms of a recommendation to City Council, that's when this pilot program concept came forward. And it was based on not having a fee system associated with it. And so to be able to do that, we had to look at what our existing capacity was within our workforce and team. And that's what drove the 50 to 100 units. So am I confident it's really scientific? No. But it's better than nothing, and it will give us some idea of what's occurring in the community with the rental units. I've been in some that we've all of us who work in building and construction have been in housing units where we have concerns, and we didn't have the authority to do anything about them previously in a proactive fashion. But with that said, the 5,400 units, that's all of our units, includes the single family detached ones as well. What I have to figure out is how to use the Yamhill County tax codes, because again, we won't have our own database. We're going to be trying to use existing databases, which the best one in front of us is the Yamhill County Assessor's Office, and use their tax codes to identify what are rental units and what aren't. And we're going to still explore that further with them.
Thank you. And I have one follow-up question. In the inspection process, you talked about notifying landlord and tenant 21 days in advance and the entire process. Why in some of these multifamily buildings would we not notify the landlord that their building could be inspected? If it's unit, my fear would be that if it's hyper-specific to an individual unit within an apartment complex, and you have somebody that's not maintaining things more generally, that of course that 21-day period, and my problem isn't with the 21 notification day period, it's that what's to say they couldn't go in and do all the repairs that were needed in that one unit while neglecting all the other units? So my question is, why would we not just say your property is up for inspection, and then notify those tenants as well? Not that it would be feasible to go in and inspect every unit, but it would add a level of randomness to inspecting multifamily residential for those that, of course, we want to believe that most of our landlords want to create safe and healthy spaces. And as we know, not all of our housing units are safe and healthy spaces. So was there any discussion around that, about having whole multifamily buildings be brought out as the sample, as opposed to an individual apartment within a building? Thank you.
Yeah, so if I understand your question, I thought I heard 2 different questions in there. One would be that if we're choosing a multifamily structure, why would we identify which particular unit in that structure to inspect, that we say we could be inspecting, that we're going to choose one, but we're going to notify all, and choose on the day or close to the day, so that it's more random. It's more of a lottery for that structure as well. I think that's why I heard this one question. And then the second question I think I heard was, if not that, then why not just choose, if we're going to do 50 to 100 a year, and we choose an apartment complex that has 50 units, why not just do all the units in that one apartment complex? So I'm going to ask the second question.
Just the first question. I didn't mean to ask the second question.
Then I'm going to defer that to Amanda. The first question.
Yeah, so Councilor Drabkin, I think the issue that we're going to run into is there's two issues. One is we need the landlord's consent. Otherwise, we need to go through an administrative warrant process to get on the site. And I think we could run into some constitutional issues if we're not being specific about where we're going on the site. The second thing is that this process allows us to go into the property, into the tenant's rental unit. It does not allow the landlord to do so. So if the landlord wants the ability to go in, the landlord needs to also provide their own notice. And if we don't specify what unit that we're going into, they can't then give their notice to also go in and see what the rental unit looks like and what that inspection entails.
So we'll have to include that tenant right in our product that we send out, so the tenants know that the landlord can't come into their unit without their permission first.
Good discussion. Thank you for that clarification. Chris, you're next, and then Kelly Minke after.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lower my electronic hand here. Okay. So I have two questions. First, just kind of as a background, because I haven't really heard any quantitative explanation of what led up to this. I was present on some of the discussions early on, and I don't remember any quantitative information then either. So I'm curious, how many complaints have we actually received at the city level that led to this?
So, and that's a discussion we had at the committee level as well. I know that I've been contacted by several tenants over the last couple of years who did not want to go on the record about their substandard housing conditions. I know that there's counselors who've been contacted as well, and some of our staff. So we have not collected any of that information. And so that was asked by a committee member consistently for several months. We don't have any data. That's why there was the thought that we needed to do a pilot program to see if the issue exists and collect the data.
So then that would lead to my second question, which would be, if we're going to go ahead with such a program, what is the metric that we will use to determine whether or not we're going to move forward at the end of 5 years? And let me backtrack and say to the question that I heard Council President asking, I'm not concerned with the statistical analysis portion of this in terms of the number of units we're looking at, because if you consider like polls, for instance, they get a much smaller sampling size. So that doesn't, the sample size is not concerning to me as long as we have some sort of understanding of the variation plus or minus, you understand what I'm saying there.
Yeah, the margin of error, right?
Correct. So I'm good with the sample size. I'm not concerned about that, but what I am concerned about is what qualifies this being a go-for program at the end of 5 years. Because at this point, we don't really have any numbers that we're basing on creating this thing to begin with. We have kind of this several calls over several years, which may or may not equate to a problem that we need to address as a city. And we already have some state programs that are already in place for such rental issues. So I guess I want to know what kind of metric are we looking at the end of this? To
So
determine.
the rental inspection committee did not create that recommendation for you. What they recommended to you is to do the pilot program and collect the information. They did not discuss a recommendation of, what's the metric at the end to make the decision as a city council as to whether to continue forward with the program or not, or just to prop it up in a more structured systematic way. So that would be a discussion for city council to have. In terms of the state programs that are available, none of them are proactive programs, which is the difference that we're talking about here. So there are a lot of different ways for a tenant to reach out and say, I feel like I'm having a problem with either my housing unit being substandard or my landlord. There's laws out there for that, but there are also in other communities that we reached out to who have these programs, they do have data about those communities in terms of what they were experiencing with their tenants in rental units who were not willing to reach out to government agencies to seek help.
So following along that logic, if a person called you today and they said, hey, I've got this problem, I don't really want to go on record, what do you have available already that you can be recommending to them? I mean, can't you already put them in touch with programs at the state level that would address this for them? Or is there really nothing at this point that they would have that you could refer them to?
As far as we know, right now there is nothing, unfortunately. Currently, if a resident does have a problem with their unit and their landlord is not making the repairs, they would have to call and make the complaints themselves and show proof that they've given proper notification to the landlord before we can assist them. Now, what we talked about during the presentation, we're very much concerned for those individuals that have disabilities, that, English is not their strongest language. They don't have help. They don't have an advocate or don't even know that there's such program available. And so with these type of proactive programs, we're able to cover, a full spectrum of people, not just those individuals that know what is available. Statewide, there's really nothing available. I worked at the Housing Authority for 10 years. I started there at the front desk. I remember receiving phone calls from tenants wanting us to go and inspect their units because they were having issues, or they knew family or friends, or they just knew of a certain landlord that wasn't keeping up with their rentals, and there was nothing we could do, unless they were current clients and they were due for inspections. But as far as programs out there, I do know that there isn't in the state of Oregon, unfortunately, that helps individuals having problems with their units or a proactive program. There's proactive inspection programs out there, but they're very much community-based. Like Gresham is one of the few communities that has such proactive program. And when we were looking in considering this type of program, we looked at other states as well with other communities. And there's a lot of surveys. I know there's a community in California that did the survey after a pilot program, and it helped a lot with their housing stock and keeping the rentals in a safe manner, and helped retain those rentals as well. And they have data available. That's that's.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess you kind of went around to my question. So I'm going to try to rephrase it back. What I heard for the answer to the question that I asked is that in terms of being able to do so in such a way as that they would keep anonymity, there is no program available to them.
No, there's not.
But is there a way, if I'm a tenant, I've got a problem with my unit, is there a way for this, that if I go to the planning department and say, hey, I've got this problem, can you help me? Is there any program at all at the state level that actually does that currently? If it's not anonymous, even non-anonymous, because I remember as an early 20-something calling the state and saying my house that I'm staying in is not safe, and they walked me through a process of what that meant, what qualified for unsafe, and told me that I could go back to the landlord, and they walked me through this whole process of going back to the landlord and saying to them, if you don't fix this, I'm not going to pay my rent until this is fixed, or I'm going to pay to fix it and take that out of my rent. Does that no longer exist in the state?
Tenant landlord laws, that does exist, and that's covered in there, yes. But, like we stated earlier, there's some individuals that have disabilities that wouldn't be able to know how to write a letter or how to go about, looking for help.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not trying to be hard. I'm just trying to understand what problem we're really trying to fill here, and does this problem exist, or is this a solution in search of a problem rather than actually addressing an existing problem at Mcminnville? So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
And just so you know, Councilor Chenoweth, the state programs are not relative to sending inspectors into the products. There are state programs that share with tenants what the tenant laws are in terms of their rights and what the process would be for that.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and call on Kelly, and then Councilor Peralta is next, and then Councilor Geary. Kelly? You're muted.
Too many buttons to push. Okay. My main concern on this, I personally think it's a worthy program, and I don't think there is a lot of recourse, particularly for people that are disabled or are in a situation where it's very difficult for them to make their concerns known. However, my concern is more of a capacity issue for the city. How many hours do you think we're going to devote to this program at 50 to 100 houses a year, or visitations? I mean, speaking of the code enforcement people, how much time will they spend on it? And then Heather and Tom and anyone else in planning, how much additional time will be spent on this? I'm just kind of curious.
So we calculated, and this is without going through it, right? So this is us sitting down, calculating what we anticipate would be the process and the how we would move through it after we get used to it in an efficient way. That each inspection would take about 2 hours in terms of total time to get to the end of the inspection. So noticing and all that stuff, and then getting into the site. And then there could be follow-up with violations on some of these inspections, up to 4 hours per caseload.
Okay, so that's just for code enforcement. Then what about the overall follow-up?
No, so what I do when I think through these processes, I will visit with the code enforcement team about what their time is. Sarah Sullivan will be involved in this, and some of her time is assigned into the code compliance budget fund. And some of my time is as well in terms of the noticing that will go out and things like that. And so that calculates in all of it.
Okay, but you're still not giving me what you might consider a budget. I guess I've got 2 hours with notices and stuff for the code inspection team, and then 4 hours. There's a
2 hours to get through an inspection.
But that's just the inspection. Then how long to deal with the noticing?
So 2 hours to get from point A to point B, point B being the inspection done. And then if there's issues on the other end of it, potentially another 2 hours in total. Now, we're multitasking, we're doing several at a time, so this counts. So that's why I'm coming to you saying 50 to 100, because I want to be able to refine it after we go through it, to set up a system for efficiencies and things like that. But we have, when we went through our planning fee study, we went down to the 10-minute increments on each process that we do. And so that's the same type of time management that I use when I'm thinking about new programs and projects like this. So I feel fairly confident that we can bring in 50 to 100 gives me a wide range as well in terms of difference. I feel fairly confident that we can bring this in within our existing capacity.
Okay, and you feel you can do that over a 5-year period too?
Yeah.
I believe, isn't that what the program's for?
Based on our current charge and programming from the city council, yes. If we get a lot more programs without additional resources, no, obviously.
I'm going to move us along. We have about 6 more minutes, and we need to give direction to Heather. Sal?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, yes, I am definitely supportive of this program. There is a need for it in our community. The need is twofold. We had basically most of the community's experts on rental housing in that committee, and the folks who are with Housing Authority and similar organizations were very clear that they don't have the tools that they need to protect tenants. And the recourse that tenants have under Oregon law is to go to court, but it's very difficult for people without means to go to court because the courts don't reward anything more than monetary damages. So usually a poor tenant would have to go out of pocket to litigate that. It's just not something folks without means can really do to protect their rights. And secondly, I think it actually protects good landlords in the community, which I think most are, because it ensures that we're hitting a minimum standard. I did want to quickly address Remy's question about the numbers. I agreed with Chris's comments about the random sample, and to that I would also add that a large number of these units, because they're in multifamily residential, are actually in a fairly small number of overall facilities throughout the town. So I feel like we're going to get a good sense of what, at least all of the large facilities are like, and start getting a sense of what some of the smaller ones, even with the small sample size. If anybody has any questions about the program, within the limitations of public meetings law, I'd be glad to answer them offline, but thanks for the time today, Mayor.
Thank you. Let's go ahead to Zach. And again, we have probably about 2-3 minutes, Zach.
I'll be real quick. I just wanted to voice my support for the program and my appreciation for bringing this to bear. All my experiences with renters and poor conditions are anecdotal, but as a builder and remodeler in the community for 10 years, one who takes a lot of calls and always goes through buildings to see what I can do to help. It's actually been many instances where I wish this program existed so I could refer those to this program for success. There's some bad conditions out there, and I hope those are addressed. I think so. My appreciation for the program is high. I would just say that in the end, like always, it's going to come down. The rub's going to come down to enforcement, and so just being able to have a good stick with the carrot as well is going to be a key to the success of the program. So, thanks for all the work.
Thank you. And again, Heather and Claudia and committee, I know there's a number of committee members on the call. Thank you for your hard work. I so much appreciate our thoughtful approach as a pilot. I understand we don't have money for a registry. I'm hoping that we can more define the data collection that we would have. And the question that I would have, not to be answered tonight, but if we see a growing program or a growing problem, can we bring it to the council before 5 years, i.e. annual reports to us from the committee? What I would ask to do is to give a thumbs up if we want to move forward with the recommendation of the committee. So I'll go Zach. I see Remy's up, I'm up. Kelly is up. Sal, you mentioned you're up. Chris? You're on mute.
I'm using two different computers. You've got a majority, so really it doesn't matter.
Okay. And then Adam, just to get your input.
Yeah, I mean, there's a majority there, and in general, I'm supportive of people having a safe place to live. I guess the concern I have is, some landlords haven't been paid in the last 18 months, and who knows if anything will get extended or whatnot. So I know that's a short-term problem, and this is a long-term solution. So I'm not saying that's the reason not to do it, but I definitely think being cognizant of that, there probably has been deferred maintenance over the last year and a half because landlords have been struggling just to pay their mortgages on their investment properties.
Thank you for those additional thoughts and moving forward. It is 5:59 right now. I see Remy has her hand up, but I think we need to get ready for our next meeting. So Heather, do you feel like you have direction from the council this evening?
I do, and just to follow up on Councilor Garvin's comments, there is landlord assistance funds if landlords are looking for that based on COVID recovery. So.
Okay, great. Well, I will adjourn our meeting this evening, our work session. It is 6:59 right now. We will pick up on our regular council meeting on this Zoom call. So don't leave, and we will start up in 2 minutes. Thank you all. Well, it is 7:01, and so I will call us all back to the meeting and open the City Council meeting of November 9th, 2021. And Claudia, could you do a roll call for us?
Councillor Garvin?
Here.
Councillor Geary?
Note that he is on the line, but
Councillor Minke?
note that she's on the line but has stepped away.
Councillor Chenoweth?
Present.
Councillor Peralta?
Here.
Council President Drapkin?
Here.
And Mayor Hill.
Here. Thank you. And again, welcome to our meeting this evening. I will go ahead and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands. This is embarrassing. Okay.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice
for all.
For all. Thank you. Thank you, Sal. Okay. That will take us this evening to our comments from our community members, and anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on a topic other than a quasi other than an item that's in litigation, quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for a public hearing at a future date. We will limit the comments to 3 minutes per person, and if you have a desire to speak this evening, please raise your hand and Claudia will call on you. And so let's go ahead and start our community input this evening. Claudia, do you have anyone that signed up? I know that we received testimony from a number of individuals this evening that was received by council.
Mayor and Council, it doesn't look like anyone has signed up. As you stated, Mayor, we did receive a few additional public comment emails that I will put onto the record. Those emails are from Kevin Chambers, Sandra Feston, and Heather Miller. They will be in the packet tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Claudia. That takes us to a presentation this evening, one that I'm very excited to hear. We have Unidos building community presentation. We've got the executive director, Miriam, and I meet on a monthly basis, and we've just asked her to kind of tell the story and their successes and what we can do to more support them. So Miriam, we'll turn this time over to you. And Miriam,
Good evening, everybody.
There you go.
Just setting up my screen. Good evening, Mayor Hill, Council President Drapkin, and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you an update about Unidos Bridging Community. My name is Miriam Vargas Corona, and I am the Executive Director. My pronouns are she, her, ella. Community is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Mcminnville. We have been serving the Latinx immigrant communities of Yamhill County since 2012, and pictured here is our team of staff. Our mission is to promote the integration, participation, representation, and success of Latino individuals and families, and to build bridges of support and understanding between Latinos and non-Latinos. Historically, Unidos had provided programming around civic engagement, advocacy, community organizing, and immigration support. But when the COVID-19 pandemic arrived to our communities, we observed an increasingly disproportionate rate of COVID-19 infections within our population. For example, at one point last year, the Latinx population in Yamhill County experienced 37% of the total positive cases, while we are only 16.5% of the population. Our communities were getting hit hard and fast by the virus, and we decided to pivot and provide direct services for the first time. So we now provide linguistically and culturally responsive COVID-19 community outreach and engagement programming for our population. And I'll be sharing more details about this tonight. During the pandemic, we partnered with Virginia Garcia Clinic to organize mass community testing events. We currently partner with Yamhill County Public Health and Providence Newburgh to organize targeted community vaccination events. And these are done at churches, schools, and public parks. And you'll see here some of pictures of these events. Our vaccination events are centered around families and individuals who have less flexible, some of us. Our events are held on Saturdays and weekday evenings, and we make sure to have interpretation. We include resource fairs, we have music performances, and we provide food to make sure our events are welcoming and accessible to our community's needs and preferences. We have a team of 3 field navigators, and they are dedicated to reaching the agriculture workers of Yamhill County. They visit work sites to provide in-person education about COVID-19, and they provide resource navigation support. Field navigators have brief conversations with workers as they continue with their labor, and if the employer allows it, they give presentations to small groups of workers. We receive monthly shipments of PPE from the Oregon Health Authority, and these items are distributed to the workers in resource kits that are given out to them in the outreach visits. So this direct access to a service provider such as Unidos bridges a language and digital literacy gap that workers often face. And while we know that Spanish language information is needed right now, we have been learning that there is a growing number of workers whose first languages are indigenous, such as different variations of the Mam language from Guatemala. We are grateful to the Housing Authority of Yamhill County and various manufactured home parks in cities like Dayton, Mcminnville, Lafayette, and Newburgh, who have shared their locations with us so that we can bring our outreach and resource information directly to their tenants. So pictured here are staff members on the left at Deskins Commons Apartments in Newburgh, and on the right at Country View Manor Manufactured Home Park in Dayton. Our communities are to ensure that they can receive important resource and service information during their daily routines. So we have relied a lot on partnerships with churches, culturally specific small businesses, and schools to reach our population. In Mcminnville, we have regularly set up tabling stations at El Rancho Market, Super Mini Hidalgo, Tequila Grill, Noah's Bakery, and Zapateria Leon. These are all small businesses that are big supporters of Unidos, and they are owned and operated by community members from the population that we serve. We are also grateful for the support of faith-based partners such as St. James Catholic Church and the Mcminnville Adventist Church. They have helped to connect their congregations to our programs, and it has been very appreciated. We know that mass media communications in Spanish are very limited for our population. Unidos reaches our community through Facebook and Spanish language radio stations because we know that these are the two major sources of information for us. Our staff has featured subject matter experts as guest speakers for Facebook Live video interviews, and they provide answers to questions and concerns that our population is experiencing. Pictured on the left are staff members and a volunteer from the Promotores de Salud group interviewing Dr. Don Motner, Senior Health Advisor with the Oregon Health Authority. They discussed myths of the COVID-19 vaccine. And to the right are staff members preparing for an interview with a major Spanish language radio station in the state. And we provided information about the resources and services that Unidos has available. Having access to healthcare services is essential during these difficult times. We have an Oregon Health Plan certified enrollment assister on our staff, and she helps to fill out the Oregon Health Plan application for our clients. She also provides navigation support for OHP benefits or other social services that contribute towards a person's health and well-being. Our exam prep classes are our longest running program. Classes are taught by volunteers from the community for 8 weeks per session, and we hold three sessions annually. During the pandemic, we've offered the sessions through Zoom, and students who have taken their citizenship exam and successfully passed it, will regularly send us pictures of themselves at their oath ceremony. So pictured on the right is Aurelia Plancarte. She was a student from our last Newburgh session, and she's holding her naturalization certificate as a new U.S. citizen. Her proud daughter is Jules Martinez Plancarte, who is the first Latina City Council member of Newburgh. Unidos is one of 20 nonprofit organizations that make up the Oregon Worker Relief Fund Coalition. It was formed during the COVID-19 pandemic to provide grassroots mutual aid support to Oregonian workers who are excluded from the federal stimulus packages and unemployment benefits due to their immigration status. There are two funds that Unidos staff and volunteers advocate for. The first one is the Oregon Worker Relief Fund, which provides emergency financial assistance to workers who have lost wages or have lost their job due to the pandemic. The second fund is the Oregon Worker Quarantine Fund, and this provides financial assistance to agriculture workers who, or food service workers who must be in quarantine and need to miss work because they have either tested positive for COVID-19 or were exposed to somebody with COVID-19, either at home or in the workplace. And to date, Unidos has navigated over 1,800 applications for these funds. Our Advocacy Coalition is made up of organizations, schools, and agencies that serve the Latinx communities of Yamhill County. We gather once a month over Zoom now to discuss ways to increase service and resource information sharing to our population. We also discuss opportunities for collaboration and to provide updates about our programming. So pictured here are some of our partners, and these are pictures of our resource fairs at the COVID-19 vaccination events that we've had. So our work is supported by organizations and community members who believe in our mission. And there are various opportunities for folks who want to join us in making a positive impact. We welcome financial contributions and volunteer service to help broaden our reach in our communities. So if you have connections to bilingual healthcare providers, right now we are particularly interested in partnering with you to address the myths and rumors around COVID-19 through factual and science-based information. If you are an agricultural or manufacturing employer, we'd like to partner with you to provide education, PPE, and resource information to your Latinx staff. And lastly, service-oriented individuals who are interested in joining our board of directors. Thank you for the opportunity to share about our work. Displayed are the various ways to contact us, to learn more about what we're doing, and to connect with our staff. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Let's go ahead and open up for any questions that members of the council might have. And if we could drop the sharing so that we could see the counselors who might have questions for you, Miriam. Okay, there we go. Well, I'm going to start out just to let you know how, just bravo to the successes that you've had. Again, I've watched you silently from afar for many, many, many years, and to hear you're pivoting to help those within your community that need the help during the COVID, and being able to staff up and provide such needed services. Again, I just salute you, and I want this story to be heard by the council, because it's just another one of our nonprofits out in the community that are so effective in delivering services that we may not be able to do from a city perspective. So again, as you go back to your board meeting, Miriam, tell everyone involved, thank you. Thank you, thank you. That was a great story. So Zach, I see that your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 comments, 1 question for you, if I may. Comment 1, Miriam, thank you directly for your time on MacPac. Your input and information on there has been invaluable, so thank you. Secondly, I was dismayed that your presentation left off that really fun music program you guys did with the guitarist. Hiram and Samantha and I were dancing around the living room, and that was very fun. So you guys have done some really fun stuff, and we've been able to take part in, so thank you. My question then is, since I'm done with my 2 comments, is I guess looking forward at, as we close out the year, and as Unidos continues to strive to grow and be better suited to serve their community and populations, what do you see as like the top 1 or 2 sort of challenges or organizational hurdles you guys are going to set to tackle in the coming year? And then the other end of that question is always sort of how could this group or how could the city be an asset to you in your ability to deliver your services?
Well, thank you for your support, Councilor and Mayor. Thank you. I appreciate you cheerleading us. That's a really good question. I think the next year we're going to continue doing education around COVID prevention. I still see that as something that will be present in our lives for the next year. I do hope that we can start to return to doing more community organizing work and advocacy in the community. The pandemic, I'm sure you've heard this from many other partners, has really highlighted the needs that we had been experiencing as a community, but just on a bigger level. And I think that it's also an opportunity for us to have some real deep conversations about what we would like to see in the community in terms of either programming or services or changes that need to happen for families and individuals to just have a better experience, better living condition. And so I think it's also an exciting time where we have people's attention now that the needs are so prominent to really get creative and to use our visionary skills to dream about a better future together. So that's something that I'm really excited about. It's something that I have planned for our staff to take advantage of. You know, during the pandemic, with all of these events and outreach that we've been doing, we've been able to meet a lot more people in our service population, and we've developed a lot more new relationships. And so I think that for Unidos is an opportunity to broaden our base of supporters. How we could partner with the city, that's a good question. I don't have a direct answer for you, but I think as we identify what are the priority needs in the community, I know that I can reach out to the mayor and you know, you all as city council members and to the city manager to discuss partnerships. So I do appreciate that relationship that we have. Thank you.
Again, any questions or comments? Seeing none, again, thank you, Miriam. And again, we want to have you in front of us on a regular basis because it's a story that's so intertwined with our community. And I think you're the best source to get that information. So again, thank you this evening. That takes care of our presentations this evening. We're going to move to advice and informational items, and we'll take reports from the counselors on committee and board assignments. I'll go ahead and start with Sal. Go ahead, Sal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything to report.
Thank you. Let's go to Chris.
I am in the same boat as Councilor Peralta.
Thank you, Chris. Zach?
As always, I'm going to buck the trend. Landscape Review Committee met last week. I think it was just last week. They approved a continuation of a landscape plan for Mcminnville Water and Lights new fueling station out there, and then they continued to have a good discussion of code amendments and push that along. And so good rousing discussion from a lot of people who have a good head on their shoulders. MacPac had a meeting last week, I think, which will be the penultimate meeting. A quick meeting in which we reviewed the internal survey results of MacPac to see where we were on the final recommendation and kind of moved to solidify that. Then we discussed next steps. The next meeting will be the final meeting in which we kind of hear from the consultants, I think led by Jim Calvage, as well as Susan and Ken Ballard on getting that presentation back to council spooled up and ready to go. And then we also had, lastly, a discussion. MacPac had a discussion led by Kevin Chambers on discussed a letter of support for the council's effort on new revenue, and I only bring that up as we have it in our packet just to highlight the fact that all the members. Two names that were absent from the MacPac list were Meredith Maxfield and I, as we abstained from that discussion because we've already been part of the discussion on revenue and kind of we're already a part of it, and it didn't seem right to be a part of that discussion. So I just want to highlight the fact that Meredith and I abstained from that discussion, as well as the vote and the support of the letter. So that's that. Thanks.
Thank you, Zach. Let's move to Adam.
Yeah, our airport commission meeting was canceled. We did have a YCOM meeting today, and relatively status quo in that meeting outside the fact that it sounds like the West Valley ASA will be up for formal discussion November 29th. So just keep that in mind as we move forward later in our meeting about the ambulance service and the potential of any mutual aid coming from Grand Ronde instead of from just the West Valley in general of Sheridan or Willamina. So, and that's all I have for committee reports.
Thank you, Adam. Let's move to Kelly.
I've reported out on the committees that I formally report on. I did want to say a big thank you to Sal for inviting us to the COG meeting a week or so ago. It's very interesting and a great opportunity for Heather and I to ask some questions, so we appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly.
Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to jump in on Kelly's point. I just wanted to thank both Kelly and Heather for not only attending the meeting, but for pushing some of the state bureaucrats that kind of deal with some of the areas that relate to the city. I definitely heard them say in a room full of people that they heard the problems that were raised by Kelly and Heather and that they were going to work on them. So I thought that was really useful. Thank you to the two of you.
Thank you, Sal. And let's go to Council President Drabkin. Remy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have our construction excise tax work session next week, the 17th. And then we also on Mcminnville affordable housing have just are in the process of sending a letter off to Oregon Housing and Community Services to better support our local nonprofits that are working on housing and hoping that they can better access some greater funds than are available locally through a potential recategorization of how our specific city and other cities similarly sized and in rural areas are viewed. And then the DEI Advisory Committee had a retreat earlier today, which I could not attend. So I have nothing to report on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Remy. Just from my perspective, our MURAC committee meeting on the 3rd of November was canceled. Just a brief update as it deals with transportation. You know, I've been keeping you pretty up to speed on the Newburgh-Dundee bypass with a lot of opportunity that's been out there. As you know, federally, the infrastructure bill was voted on last Friday, but we lost all of the earmarks. So we lost the $8 million from Congresswoman Bonamici and Wyden and Merkley. So we've lost $10 million. That doesn't mean that there's not money that's going to be coming, but they will not be earmarked for the bypass. We also lost money from ODOT that was slated to come to the bypass, $10 million, that went to another project on I-5 south of Salem. And so we still have the $32 million that was earmarked from the governor, and that's going to probably get us to a point where we can work on the interchange at 219 and the bypass. We're working feverishly to get in front of our congressional group, and Dave and I are meeting later this week, and then we're going to be meeting with ODOT next week to get us a lay of the land to see where and what we can do from that perspective. So I'll just leave it at that. Let's move forward with our department head reports. And I think we do have a presentation on the fire department staffing funding strategy, but I think I'll leave that to last and then just go through our department heads and end up with Jeff and Rich. So Kylie first.
Hello, just a couple updates for the council this evening. The federal OSHA has published their emergency temporary standard regarding COVID-19 vaccines in the workplace. As a local government employer, we're subject to what Oregon OSHA publishes. So we're still waiting for Oregon OSHA to share that information. Just so the council is aware, state OSHA agencies have to provide a rule that is as effective or more effective than the federal rule. So we know that the rule for the state will at least be what the federal one is. It could be more stringent though. So as we learn that, we will continue to kind of walk through that path, create an internal policy and go ahead and begin administering that. We do have a handful of employees, not a handful, a whole department who is subject to a vaccine rule through the Oregon Health Authority. So that's our firefighters. We also have some employees who work in and out of our schools locally, and those folks are also subject to that. So we do have some employees where that is a current requirement. It is likely to move to all employees once we see the OSHA rule. So just an update on that. The only other thing I wanted to share with the council, and maybe put the council at ease a bit, is that the great resignation that we hear on social media and in business journals and whatnot is rearing its head a little bit in the city. And that's to be expected when communities go through a thing like a pandemic. It causes a lot of self-reflection and people decide if they want to continue doing what they're doing. So we've seen a number of employees leave the city to care for family members, to care for their kids, to take a job closer to family. All of those are really great reasons. So we do have a number of recruitments open right now. And we will have a couple more coming open in the next few weeks. So just be aware of that. We have positions opening, but this is very common for many employers right now. As an HR professional, I'm not worried about it. And it's an opportunity to bring new faces into our organization. So that's all I have to report this evening. Oh, and the DEI retreat was lovely. We had a small but mighty number who attended, so not even a quorum, but it was a nice time.
Thank you, Kylie. Let's go with Amanda.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to let the council know that I will be out of the office starting tomorrow through Tuesday, so back on Wednesday for our next work session. I will generally not be available and will not be responding to emails.
Thank you. Have a well-deserved time away. David Renshaw.
Good evening, Your Honor, and thank you for the opportunity. Nothing to report from Public Works Operations.
Thank you. Let's go to Heather.
Yeah, so follow up on Kylie's report. The planning department experienced the great resignation and lost 2/3 of our planning team. I'm happy to say, though, that we have brought one new person online, Adam Tate, who you'll be meeting soon. And then we have another person who will be joining us in December. And our third vacancy we will be working to fill here over the next couple of months. So I'm looking forward to a time when we have a full team again.
Thank you, Heather. Let's go to Jenny.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor. I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Let's go to Jennifer.
Good evening, everyone. I also am going to tag on to the personnel situation. So the biggest thing going on in my world is one of our longtime staff at the municipal court here in Mcminnville has taken an amazing job, not with us. She will be leaving. And so we're really, really excited for Shawn Branson. She is going to become the court administrator for the tribes of the Grand Ronde. We are so proud of her moving forward in her legal adventures. But she's a longtime employee here of the city. She's been here for 16 years. So tomorrow will be her last day in municipal court. And her last day in the office will be on Monday. So if anyone has, worked with Shawn over the years and wants to send her a note of best wishes in her new adventures, I'd really encourage you to do so. We're gonna miss her, but we're really excited for her, and we will, just like everything else in court throughout the last couple of years, we will make it work and figure it out as we go.
Thank you, Jennifer. Chief Scales.
Yeah, Mayor, nothing to report from the police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. That brings us to a consideration this evening for approval of the fire department staff funding strategy. And we have in our packet a memo from Rich and from Jeff. And so I'm going to call on Jeff to present this evening, and then we'll have the opportunity to have some discussion. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Before I launch into the memo, Deputy Chief Hannafin is here, and I think she may have one or two other items to report on tonight. So I'll turn it over to Amy first, and then we'll dive into the conversation around the memo.
Sorry, Amy. It's good to have you here this evening. Go ahead.
No worries at all. So I, much like a few of the others, also have some staffing updates, I suppose. We have had a couple longer time members resign in the last few weeks, and where we're at within our process right now, we have about 5 vacancies currently. We have one person that is still in backgrounds. We have a couple people that had been in backgrounds with us that have chosen to take employment elsewhere in the time that they had accepted jobs initially. So we are advertising pretty heavily. I think that Jeff will kind of get into some of the other things that we've got looming, but just to give some update in that respect.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you again, Mayor, members of the council. Rich is on some long-planned vacations, so I asked him to prepare the staff report that you have in your packet tonight. I won't go over it in great detail, but for the public record, let me hit some of the highlights. We did propose to the council and pursued a SAFER grant earlier in the year to staff an additional ambulance crew, which essentially would be made up of 6 equipped firefighter paramedics. That grant was unsuccessful, but we still have the need for that crew. And while this is a little bit of an out-of-cycle presentation to you, given the current status of the new revenue conversation that the Council and Budget Committee have had, as well as some emerging revenue issues that we report on in more detail in the memo, we feel comfortable making the proposal to move forward with adding 6 firefighter paramedics and a refurbished ambulance to the system to take on some of the workload that we're seeing increased. And also just to note that this ambulance crew was also identified and justified as a need in the district consolidation report that we had presented to you earlier this year, and that we'll be following up on later this calendar year. The full cost of the personnel, equipment, and capital is just over $1 million. We're going to be pursuing full cost recovery with Mcminnville Rural Fire Department, which could net us in the neighborhood of about $470,000 a year. We will recapture about $160,000 in lost revenue from ambulance calls that we have currently not been responding to ourselves. And we will see a range of increased ground emergency medical transport reimbursement somewhere in the range of $100,000 to $300,000 a year. That leaves a discretionary general fund gap of between $90,000 and about $290,000. The aforementioned discussion about revenue that you've been involved in for the last 4 months and pending action later tonight, in addition to the reality that it takes time to fill this many positions, and we're not likely to spend much of these funds in the current fiscal year, just given the nature of recruitments and the job market that we see currently. This is the recommendation from the chief and I. Deputy Chief Hannafin may be able to answer some operational questions if you have them. We're happy to take any questions. We may have to defer answers to those questions and ultimately actions, depending on the questions for Chief Lightford's return. But we wanted to be able to bring this to you and so have it here for your consideration. If you are inclined to move forward and support this recommendation, a motion to implement the recommendation would suffice for tonight. And with that, I'll do my best to answer questions as well as refer to Chief Hannafin if necessary.
So let's go ahead and open it up for council. Any questions of Jeff or Amy? Councilor Peralta.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, I just want to say I really appreciate you taking the time and the chief as well, and going through the budget and determining ways to make this pencil out in a way that actually brings more equity to our payments for fire. The lack of full cost recovery for rural fire and having that passed on to Mcminnville taxpayers over a period of many years has been a source of frustration for me. So I really appreciate that that's one of the first places that you looked for this new revenue. So I'm definitely supportive of the package. You know, the one thing I just want to say is I feel like this is an important first step to moving us away from what we've had for many years, which is a volunteer fire model supported by professional fire staff, to one that is more of a professional driven model. I see this as the first step, not the last step, in terms of what we're going to be doing with regard to fire, at least as we transition to the new fire district. And I really hope that the chief and staff will start coming together to work collaboratively, you know, as we move towards a district. I really hope this goes a way towards healing some of the wounds that we have. And I guess the only other thing I'll say is that I know this is a big bite financially for the city, but I live pretty close to the fire station, and every week I hear that siren go off. And I always wait, and when you hear the second siren go off, second alarm go off, and you know that that's because they don't have a crew to go and deal with the dangerous situation. And it puts me on pins and needles every time I hear it. So I'm really thankful that we have an opportunity to fully, you know, take a step towards fully funding this department. And thanks again for your work.
Thank you, Sal. Let's move to Adam.
Yeah, a few things. One being from the previous meeting's discussions, we had talked about three bodies for the fire engine as well as 6 for the ambulance, and I was just curious if we were going to get into that later tonight, or you wanted to have that part of the conversation at this point in the meeting, Jeff?
So we don't have a proposal for that aspect of the core services proposals. Our intent is to bring that issue back along with the other core services work that we're doing over the next couple of months.
Okay. So to Sal's point, as far as staffing and hearing that alarm going off a second time, although having another medic on the road will help by having more potential bodies available. Sal, you'd still likely hear that second siren because there's you need to have 3 people on a fire apparatus to roll out the door. And that's this current proposal. We still don't have that 3rd body on the fire engine at all times, unless I'm incorrect. If Chief Hanovan could chime in on that.
So I think you kind of touched on it a bit in that if we do have more people available, there is the potential of that crew being able to swing onto the engine if the engine is not already staffed at 3 or 4 people for the day. Though there is still potential that they would either have to wait for an ambulance crew, meet an ambulance crew on scene, or wait for a volunteer response if there are only 2 people staffed on the engine.
Thank you. And then in that staff report, it mentions the lead time on getting another medic. And driving through town the other day, I did see one of our old medics, the rehab unit, getting towed by Gales Towing. And so I was just curious if through this process, Rich or Jeff or Amy had contemplated maybe getting a newer but used medic to cut down on the lead time of having a reserve apparatus with the current age and mechanical or lack of ability in our fleet.
I can't answer that question right now, but maybe Chief Hanovan can help with that.
So I believe the ARPA funds which are proposed include a new medic within them. And then we would be looking at a refurb on this is what's proposed currently. The rehab unit you saw being towed isn't being used as a medic, though you are right in that we do have some issues with our fleet and our medics. So what is currently proposed in what Jeff and Chief Lightfoot put together is a refurbished unit, in addition to the newer medic that is being proposed within the Arpa funds.
Okay, so the refurb unit and the new unit would get us our most up-to-date fleet in the most timely fashion. It sounded like in this staff report a new unit was going to be at least a year out.
That's what we expect.
Yes, that's
supply chain issues. Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm not looking to say no to this proposal. I think it falls short. We have ARPA dollars available, so I would still be in favor of putting that third firefighter on an engine and getting us fire response time, and not solely relying on medics that are always out on calls to be able to swing over. We're on track for over 600 move-ups this year, so this medic's gonna probably accomplish 400 of those, I believe is what I read in the staff report. So, I mean, we're still gonna be running our medics at a 20% utilization rate per medic, and so I think if we're really looking to move the needle on fire response times and not just ASA service levels on the medic side, we're still needing those 3 firefighters on the engine in addition to this medic proposal. If any other counselors have thoughts on that.
We've got Zach up next.
Thank you. It's just a direct follow-up question to Adam. Adam, you have, as always, your depth and breadth of translating the sort of fire speak in terms of what unit translates to what apparatus, which translates to responses, is in depth. Can you just clarify what you're talking about you see missing in terms of bodies? I think you hit at it there a little bit, but I just want you to say it clearly again. What are you saying is missing that you feel like is missing?
Yeah, so great question, Zach. Thanks for asking. And currently in this current proposal, we're putting another 24-hour medic on the road with 6 firefighter paramedics or whatever level of certification they have, EMT firefighters. With that, we're going to have, that fourth ambulance in the system, fourth 24-hour ambulance in the system. But what happens is the fire engine rolls out of the station, and if it only has 2 bodies on it, which is what it currently rolls out of the station at, I don't know the exact number, but it seems like about 90% of the time I see it rolling around town, it has 2 people on it, an officer and an operator. They can't pull up to a fire and fight fire. It's got to wait for a medic to clear off a medic call or respond from coming back into the ASA from transfer to an out-of-area hospital or wherever the medic crews might be. And so you have a delay in your ability to fight fire. When you put that third body on the engine, you now have the ability to grab a hydrant or pull a hose line and at least actually put some water on the fire.
I think the number is 420,000, Zach.
Well, so sorry, I'm just trying to connect to kind of what Kelly's getting at versus the reasoning behind what you're getting at, Adam. What are you saying fire-wise, staff-wise is missing?
I think it's 3 people.
He's saying three people dedicated to fire.
Right, because you have 3 shifts. So it'd be 420.
Yeah. Is that true, Adam? Is that what you're saying?
That is correct, and that is correct, Kelly.
Okay.
Is there any kind of variance?
That's pulled out of the core services study that we presented at the end of September.
Right. Okay. Thanks. I know we've gone over those threads. I just wanted to kind of come back and circle around what you're getting at there, Adam.
Okay, let's move to Sal.
Yeah, is there any kind of variance in terms of the call volume? Like, are all 3 shifts essentially even in terms of volume for the ambulance, or is there a big difference between day because they do a bunch more transfers during the day because that's when the senior care centers are open or whatever, or is it really not something that we know, Chief Hannafin?
To give you exact numbers, I would certainly need to pull some of that data. I will say though, 911 doesn't stop. We are sometimes busier at night than we are during the day, and it can go vice versa. And sometimes it's throughout the whole shift. So, you can look back and say maybe there's one day of the week that tends to have lower call volume. But I will say that our call volume has been continually increased, even amidst everything that we're going through.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Sal?
Yeah, Mayor, it sounds like there's not really much of a known difference between the different shifts in terms of call volume for the ambulance.
Yes. Thank you, Sal. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess one thing that I'm not hearing being addressed in this, and I'm a little concerned about, is retention and morale, and having a staff depletion that's consistent and has been consistent for some time, and how that impacts the ability of our fire department to actually be present on calls. So, as we increase the numbers of our firefighters, as I understand it, the result is going to be that you're going to have much better morale. You're going to have probably better retention because you're not going to have a staff that's so overworked as they are right now. As I understand it, they're doing mandatory overtime, and on a weekly basis. We wouldn't be having to be paid in that overtime anymore, so there would be some cost savings there. And of course, if you're having a problem with retention, you have to retrain every time you bring a new person on, and there's going to be cost savings there. So, I was in complete support with filling this gap with ARPA dollars to begin with. I think we need to be going to that second level. And I want a commitment from my perspective, and from what I've heard from Adam, I want a commitment to get to 2 levels up as we discussed now 4 weeks ago, and not with if we can renegotiate the contract with Mac Rural, but actual solid existing dollars that we know is going to go to fill those seats. So I guess that's my comments on this.
Thank you, Chris. Let's go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, just as a point of clarity, to remind council, the SAFER grant was actually 6 bodies that needed to be on the fire engine due to poor response times and fire safety that we applied for with the SAFER grant. It wasn't actually for 6 bodies on the medic. Granted, we were going to use them as cross-staffing, but the whole point of that SAFER grant was related to the 3 bodies that I'm asking for right now.
Thank you, Adam. I just have a couple of comments for council. Number one, I was very positive in the report that came out from Chief and from Jeff. The thing that really struck me is the sustainability of the EMT staffing. That's what's been so very difficult in this discussion, is the sustainability, not being able to have it within our budget to do what we needed to do. And when we talk about, we have ARPA dollars, those are not sustainable. Those are one-time pieces of money coming in. So when I look at, we still have a gap of 90 to maybe 300,000, but having a good sense from finance and from Jeff that we will be able to make that up out of operating funding. I feel very comfortable with the proposal that's come before us this evening, that we start and then we move hopefully toward a fire district where we can have more economies of scale. So again, Jeff and Amy, and Rich isn't here tonight, but take it back. Thank you for your good work. It supports what we've seen with the consultants with Sheldon, and it falls in line still with our ability to do the fire districting without pricing ourselves outside of that. And so good work, and I'm fully in supportive of the recommendation before us this evening. Zach?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the comments too. I guess a question, follow-up question to City Manager Towery. Did I hear you say that regarding the additional fire staff, you're bringing that to us, scale up of level of service at a later date in the coming months as we address what I can't remember what our motion was for, to bring back funding, sources for the first 25 or 20 or whatever that number was. Is that what you're saying? Because I think fire was 8 or 9 or in that top 10.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes. Yeah, our intent is to bring back a couple of alternatives for you to see the impact of the magnitude of new revenue that you'll be considering probably in January. And we will have a suite of examples of how you could move a variety of the core services up beyond their current staffing level as one of the higher priority items. That fire component of the service would be part of that larger package that you see in a few months.
If I may follow up to that, I get the value of that because we're sort of talking in like, these are the 25 most important things. Order of magnitude to move those up in various ways is this big giant number. We use that information to gauge more revenue, fine tune that revenue tool that we're going to talk about later in the meeting. At that time, when you provide us those top 25, fire would be in that. Do you foresee the ability, when you bring that to us in January timeline, to pull 1 or 2 of those most important items out and run with those there? Or are you still thinking that moves as a linked group, a bundle, if you will?
So here's the reason it's a little bit challenging to answer that question. We typically bring those proposals to you as a suite of budget proposals, and they won't be so fully formed as to be our recommendations for how we incorporate funds into the new budget. They will be examples of how we can move things forward, and we're going to need to get some feedback from the council and the budget committee if those initiatives are what matches your priorities. So I'm not saying no to it, but it really depends on the subsequent conversation and direction we get from you as we begin to build the budget early in the calendar year. So it's not a no, it's just I can't forecast exactly what direction we're going to get from this body at that time, because you'll see lots of opportunities and lots of alternatives.
But there will be an opportunity, Jeff, to address it during that budget cycle.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
So just as easily as it could not move forward at all, it could move all together as a group, or 1 or 2 items could sprint ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Based on where we are financially and the direction we get from the council.
Okay. Thanks. That was totally coming from a process head wraparound perspective.
Got it. Thank you.
Sal, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, I'm still definitely a yes on this proposal to add 6, and I'd like to see a proposal back in January that's maybe a little more detailed than what was articulated today, to add the additional 3 to fire. I'm not comfortable doing it entirely out of Arpa dollars for the reason that the mayor gave. I think we need a model that's sustainable for this city. I think we need a model that doesn't have Mcminnville taxpayers paying for costs that occur outside of the coverage area for the city of Mcminnville. I think that's very problematic to use general fund dollars to subsidize services outside of our community in that way. So definitely appreciate the proposal and look forward to taking that second step at the start of the new year.
Thank you, Sal. Let's go to Remy. Remy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm kind of echoing what Councilor Peralta said. And then I just wanted to tack on that, it was not that many years ago that we added 3 police positions without planned funding, where we saw the need, we were passionate about meeting the need, and we created those positions without a plan to pay for them, and there was a lot of reverberations from that, and a lot of scrambling, and I think that to be responsible for our finances and our staff generally as well, we need to have good planning to have long-term funding for these positions. And I wish that we had that available right at this moment, but I'm also supportive of adding these positions right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Remy. Chris?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to comment in terms of the discussion about not wanting to add staff using ARPA dollars. Part of our package is already doing that. We have a staff person being added, a management level staff person being added in the ARPA dollars. So we're already doing that. Secondarily, in the reality is, if we were doing this in a vacuum, meaning we didn't have at the same time discussions about moving to a district taking place, which would effectively end the need for these extra dollars in the city budget within a year time frame, then the concern about not wanting to add this as an ongoing expense would make more logical sense. But since we are looking at a district being created, then using ARPA dollars for a stopgap, because I'm one who is wholly opposed to using it for ongoing expenses. So I get the argument. But in this case, we're not talking about using it for ongoing expenses since we're in the middle of a district process. We are looking at dollars that would be stopgap. At the same time, we're discussing, as I see it, somewhere between $2 and $4 million of increased revenue that's supposed to be being generated. So assuming a failure in the stopgap, assuming a failure in the district model, we should still be looking at an increase in revenue. So I guess I don't understand the concern there. I don't think it's relative to the police department issue that occurred years ago, since we weren't looking to move the police department to a district. I still think that we should be moving at least 2 levels on that core services chart. And if we have to do some of it through one source and some of it through another source, whatever, but we need to be doing it for the good of our community.
Thank you, Chris. Let's go to Sal and then Kelly. Sal?
Yeah, I just think it would be highly irresponsible for us to assume that we know what the outcome of that vote on the districting is gonna result in. We don't know that voters are gonna pass that vote. We haven't agreed on any revenue package to this point. So counting on revenue that doesn't exist and a vote that may go down to carry on long-term funding just doesn't make sense. It's not a safe bet. It's not a fiscally responsible bet. So I think from my point of view, we need to make sure that we're protecting the fiscal integrity of our city. And the way to do that is to make sure that when you add 6 to 9 positions, that you do that in a way that's fiscally prudent and that everything's paid for. And ARPA dollars are one-time dollars, so that's not paid for. Thank you.
Thank you, Sal. Let's go to Kelly.
I basically agree totally with Sal and Remy. I am totally in favor of what the chief and Jeff have proposed tonight, but I feel like the other issue needs to be taken up with core services further down the road in January.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, we've had an opportunity to have a discussion, so I'm just going to ask, is there a motion to authorize city staff to move forward on adding personnel and equipment to add a 24-hour medic to the system? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? Kelly? Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we move forward with with the proposal in front of us. I'll ask for those in favor to please indicate by saying aye.
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 Hey.
Aye.
Aye. And are there any in opposition? Please signify by saying nay. This motion passes unanimously 6-0 this evening. Thank you for the good discussion, the good work, and I think we've really stepped up to the plate to help us in the EMT and somewhat of our firefighting moving forward as we anticipate our involvement with the fire redistricting. So thank you. In our packets tonight, we have August and September's 2021 cash and investment report. And so I just bring that to your attention. This evening, we have minutes from our July 28, 2020 regular council meeting. That's in our consent agenda. Is there anyone that would like to take that off the consent agenda? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Kelly, seconded by Sal. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Hey.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Just one abstention.
Okay, so we have an extension this evening. The consent agenda passes this evening 5-0 with one abstention. Okay, that takes us to our resolutions this evening. Our first resolution is Resolution 2021-54, resolution of the Common Council of the City of Mcminnville approving allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds. We'll turn over to Jeff to make a presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. At your most recent joint council and budget committee work session, the budget committee voted to forward a recommendation to you for ARPA funds. Staff had initially presented 50 projects for potential funding with a range of costs from our best estimate from low to high. The budget committee recommended that 48 of those projects move forward. The resolution that you have tonight acknowledges those 48 projects that range in cost in total about $4.7 million to $6.7 million at the high end, which would leave at a minimum about another $1 million of ARPA funds available. It's not likely that all of those projects would come in at the high end of the range. With the adoption of this resolution, staff will be bringing back to you a series of recommendations on the projects that are incorporated in the resolution. There would be specific budgets, implementation plans, and timeframes for each of those projects as they come forward to you. The initial focus will be on high priority projects in the general order that they are presented, but will also be informed by readiness to proceed, which could vary based on the type of project, the size of project, and how many, if there are other partners engaged in their ability to move forward. So with that brief overview, we'd be happy to answer any questions, and the recommendation from the budget committee is that you approve this resolution tonight.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'll just, a thought of clarification. Again, we are moving off of a recommendation of the budget committee to move forward. We delayed that vote 2 weeks ago to give some opportunity for those that felt like they didn't have enough time in the public to take a look at what we had done. And so that's why this has been moved to tonight, the 9th, is to give some additional time. So let's open it up for council discussion. Seeing Adam?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for everybody that did agree to push this forward to this meeting. It was nice to get Mark Davis's letter, and I did take that to heart reading through that. The other thing that came that night was we all got that email from Chief Scales about staff being, or the CRU being shelved because of vacancies in staff. And then when you refer to our budget from this year, those vacancies have to be held open. And so I've been digging through the budget. You know, it talks about the vacancies that'll be held open on page 167, and then I went into the salary schedule on page 60 and kind of broke all that down, and it seems like if we were to allow the police department to fill those positions, I mean, that police is just like fire, if not worse, that the onboard time takes forever. So unless they get a lateral hire, you know, by the time they get through the academy and get on the street on their own and out of their field training officer program, it's, you know, a year-long process. And so I don't know where council would be at on it, but whether they want to use ARPA dollars, seems like it'd be about $150,000 to greenlight the chief to look at hiring those positions now instead of holding them open until fiscal year 22-23. Or the other thing that came up that night of the 26th was Jennifer mentioned in her staff report that the ending fund balance came in about $500,000 over. So I just wanted to put that out there before we pass this ARPA discussion. I think that does definitely affect the service levels and the livability of the city. I think the CRU program was doing good work, especially with those shootings we had in town. The ability to put staff on that right away and not rely on patrol staff to do that while they're trying to do other things, I think was a big help. And then the other thing would just be probably backing out that emergency management position. I think that as long as we have vacancies right now within departments and we have hiring freezes going on, we shouldn't be adding additional payroll in departments onto the city's roles. I think we should be backfilling our vacancies with ARPA dollars versus increasing our burn rate by adding another position within the organization.
Jeff, do you want to address any of Adam's comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We've actually already authorized those positions to be posted. It's to the vacancy savings. We would anticipate meeting those standards. We would not have. We're not requiring those positions in the police department to stay vacant for the rest of the fiscal year. That's not the approach that was laid out in the budget, and so we've already started that process to move forward to fill those positions.
Thank you, Jeff. Did that answer your question, Adam?
Somewhat. I mean, I know the one position was through the budget was supposed to be left open for the full fiscal year, but I thought some of these vacancies from officers moving out of state were the 6-month vacancies that were being utilized to get the 10% savings for the budget, for this fiscal year budget, without laying anybody off back in July.
Yeah, we expect the time it may take to fill those positions will result in vacancy savings, but we are moving forward with those recruitment processes. With respect to the comment about the emergency management position, I don't disagree with that. I would not recommend removing it from the list, but it's not going to be an immediate high priority that we bring forward to fill that position now. We've got, as the counselor said, enough existing funded vacancies to keep recruitment plenty busy for the time being.
Okay, so just to clarify, the only vacancy that's being held open or frozen right now is that one position in the police department. Everything else, they got the green light to hire for?
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were clear to hire 3, or we could take a policy direction to change that, because that's just the way I read the budget. So my apologies on that.
No worries. No worries at all. Thank you. Appreciate the support.
Let's go over to Sal.
Yeah, in light of Adam's comments, I do agree that that I would prefer to hold off on hiring the emergency management position also, and I'm grateful for the clarification by Jeff on the police hiring situation. I'm comfortable with where that is at.
Thank you, Sal. Let's go to Zach.
Thanks. I guess follow up to the Jeff Adam discussion. So can you translate to that into terms of, is the CRU getting mothballed or no? To use the chief's terminology.
Those officers have been reassigned to either detective or patrol duties until we're able to fill positions.
Got it. So it's rolling back out once that gets corrected, like you said, you guys are doing.
Yeah, when we're fully staffed, we would love to reestablish the CRU. I see Chief Scales is on the line. He can add some more information.
Yeah, Councilor Gary, to your point, the CRU has been mothballed for the time being, with those officers being pushed into patrol and up into detectives. So if we have the green light to fill the positions, once those people get trained, we are good to go, and we will staff that again.
And from what I'm gathering from this conversation, the green light has been given. Is that what I heard?
I was under the impression from our budget message that we were to have some vacancy holds, but I do know that we're recruiting. Jeff and I have had sidebar conversations where he would be open to bringing people on, depending upon the revenue generation, that sort of those sort of discussions that we are going to go on to again tonight. But it sounds like we're good to go.
Okay. Let's see, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to echo both Adam and Sal's comment to remove that emergency manager off of there. I think if we're serious about not wanting to add expenses, then ongoing expenses, then we need to take that off the Arpa funds. And I also think that at a time we're having problems in personnel in other areas, that's not the place we need to be adding it. So I just want to echo those sentiments.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, are we ready to ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2021-54?
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Mark Davis has signed up to request to speak. Can we please allow him to speak?
Okay, point of order, Amanda, can we open it up for public testimony? I know we've received a letter that has been read into the record. What's your thoughts?
So, Mayor, if it's opened up for Mr. Davis to comment, then it needs to be opened up for anyone else who's in attendance to speak if they are requesting to speak. I'm not sure if that opportunity has been provided to other people or known to other people prior to this meeting. So it's the council's prerogative whether the council is willing to entertain comments from the public. So I would recommend a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I would like to move that we table the discussion on this conversation and open a discussion for public comment.
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any negatives or opposition, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Okay, the motion on the table to open it up for public testimony passes. from my perspective, 5-1. So let's go ahead, Claudia, and we know that Mark would like to make some comments, and you see if there are any others that would like to make comments. So go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Mark Davis, 652 Southeast Washington Street here in Mcminnville. I appreciate this opportunity to comment on your plans for spending the ARPA money. I mean, I personally think, like I indicated in my letter, that you should have asked for public comment long before this point where you're just about to make the decision. But be that as it may, I'm generally supportive of the various things you have on there. Like all of you, I could probably say this is more important than that, but I think you and the members of the budget committee did a good job of considering what was out there. I was a little uncomfortable with the removal of the money for water and light. I almost felt like that was because water and light has money, and water and light has money because they've done a good job of managing their resources. And I just think that's kind of a bad reason to not fund something like a water system, which seems to me to be pretty important. And this is one-time expenditures. So that was something that caught my eye in your discussion. The other thing, there was some talk about the navigation center. I mean, if I look back to the last 10 years of attending council meetings, and I've been at most of them, either on Zoom or in person, I mean, you have spent a greater percentage of your time dealing with people that don't have a permanent place to live than just about any other issue I can think of. I mean, public comments and just, you know, what are we going to do? How are we going to solve this? Am I convinced that the navigation center is going to solve the problem completely and you're never going to discuss it again? No. But I think we've got $1.5 million from the state to get this started, and I think we should take advantage of that money, put a little bit of the ARPA money in there too, and see if we can make some headway on this. I mean, I just think it's an issue that's, you know, critical for the city to deal with. And final comment is on our innovation center. I'm not real impressed with how innovative it is. I mean, it sounds to me like business as usual. Let's take, you know, 100 acres or so out on the edge of town, and let's, you know, cut it up into something and start a plan, and we're going to call it an incubator, and I don't know what all you've got going out there. I mean, I read the stuff. It seems to me like what we really need is an innovative center in the entire city. I mean, take that money you're spending on broadband and make it so everyone has an opportunity to be innovative, not just a few elite people that are in a special business park somewhere. I mean, we could start businesses from home. I mean, if we had broadband and that kind of support throughout the community, I think we would get a lot more bang for the buck than something new out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for those always insightful and timely messages. Claudia, do we have any other public testimony?
Mayor and Council, it doesn't look like anyone else has signed up.
Okay, thank you. I will then go back to asking for a motion to approve resolution number 2021-54.
I would like to make a motion to remove the emergency manager position from the proposed ARPA plan before adoption.
Second.
Okay, let's back up a little bit.
Point of clarification, Mayor?
What's that?
I have a point of clarification.
Go ahead.
If I could. Adam, is your motion to adopt the measure without the emergency manager position, or is it to just remove the emergency management position? Meaning, are we voting on the whole thing or just that one part of it?
I mean, that's my only objection to the current list. So it could be either or. Point of order wise, I wasn't sure what way we needed to do that. So if we need to remove it first and then make another motion to vote on the remaining list, we can do that. If that's what Amanda would recommend.
And, go ahead, Amanda.
I was going to say, Councilor Garvin, you can either make a motion to approve the ARPA list, but with the exception of removing, I think that's item number 15 on the list. So you could either make that motion, or if you want to make a motion just to remove that item before consideration of the rest of the list, you can do that as well. So it's up to you as the person making the motion.
And then I'll go over to Jeff for one area of clarification, Adam, before we move forward. There are going to be ARPA funds that are not going to be designated at this particular time. And the emergency manager is one of those things that we can have further discussion if the council so desires not to fund it with ARPA. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure that, you know, the ARPA fund list isn't carved in stone. It is a document that has been reviewed by the Budget Committee and the Council, and we still have lots of discussion, I think, moving forward. We've got, you know, we'll have over $1 million that are not focused right now in that arena. You know, as Mark Davis mentioned, you know, Mac Water and Light is there, but we haven't designated that. So again, I just want a clarification of point that, you know, by moving what was recommended doesn't mean that those dollars have to be used
specifically for that. So Chris and then Sal.
Mayor, could I follow up, Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, Amanda. Well, since we have a motion, I'd like Councilor Garvin to clarify his motion and also to get confirmation that from Councilor Chenoweth that he still seconds whatever the motion is that Councilor Garvin is putting forward. So Adam, after that brief discussion, where do you sit? Because you have a motion on the table.
To keep it clean and allow for further dialogue around the remaining of the list, I would like to make a motion just to remove the emergency manager position from the proposed list. But this motion is not in relation to adopting the remainder of the list. Okay. And Chris, do you still support that?
Yeah, I mean, I raised my hand to say I would support it either way. I really appreciate Mark Davis's words, and I appreciate all those that took time to send in comments to us. But specifically Mark Davis saying that there are things on this list we all don't like, and there's things on this list we all do like. There are some things on this I would never have agreed to if it wasn't in a package deal. But, you know, good governance is not getting everything you want. Good governance is getting the best package we can put together for our citizens. And so I would accept it either way.
Okay, so Amanda, my understanding is that Adam would like to take off the employment of emergency manager. Chris has seconded that. Is that your understanding at this point? Correct. And so I will call for a vote. All those in favor of taking off the emergency manager off the list that's come from the Budget Committee to us this evening, please indicate by saying aye. Mayor, before we get... Go ahead, Amanda. Sorry, I apologize for this. Just since we haven't had a discussion on this specific issue and Councilor Peralta has his hand raised, I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for council discussion on this specific issue before there's a vote. Thank you, Amanda, for that.
Thank you. And I'm embarrassed that my hand was raised because it was by accident, so.
Okay.
But thank you, Amanda.
And so, but to Amanda's point, any discussion on the resolution as presented right now?
I'll just draw up in Sal's stead that I understand the hesitation for it. I've heard from staff that it's not a high priority. Not only have I heard from staff that it's not a high priority that they'll work on it currently, it is it's got to come back from us like all these as supplemental budget items, and so there'll be further discussion. I really value the emergency manager. I see it as a step towards our commitment and moving towards actually planning for and being resilient at a community level, climate change and the effects therein, and in the myriad ways that's going to absolutely destroy our infrastructure and our ability to respond and continue to provide services that we're going to talk about in later motions. So I'm a fan of the emergency manager. I hear the staff saying they're going to address that in a way that makes sense in balance and works in concert with all the other services that we're providing. So I'm going to support continuing to keep that on our list.
Thank you, Zach. Let's go to Kelly.
I would echo Zach's sentiments. I just personally, I think the emergency management position is key to future looking in developing this emergency management system. We've talked about it for years. I mean, we spent most of this evening discussing police and fire. It all hinges around emergency management, so I think it's critical.
Thank you, Kelly.
I would
Sal?
favor leaving it. I would not vote for it
Okay.
at this point.
Let's go up to Sal.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand Kelly's last point. So you would not support removing the emergency manager from the list, is what you just said?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah. I agree that we need to fill this position. It's only a half-time position. I don't like the idea of filling it with ARPA dollars, but I also kind of tend to think that we're going to address some of these issues later. So I honestly could go either way on it tonight. I don't think it's going to be a significant thing, because I think we're going to end up funding the position anyway at some point, because we really do need the position in the city in light of the experiences we've been having. I think Zach's point was spot on. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on it.
Thank you, Sal. Adam?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I'm definitely not in favor of not having an emergency manager. I just think it should come in that core services discussion. Before we're propping up another department or another position and altogether within the organization, I think we should maybe look at partnering better with Brian Young at the county and move in that direction until we can, sustainably fund this position going forward. I definitely think the emergency management position is something that could bring tremendous value to the city for a lot of the reasons that Zach cited. I just don't like increasing our burn rate when it's already not one of our core services that we offer within the city. So, if it's police, fire, roads, sewer, water, those are things I think are the very basic levels of city services, and emergency management is important, but I don't think it should be coming out of ARPA dollars. I'd like to see it come out of our next discussion in this meeting, which is revenue generation.
Thank you, Adam. Let's go to Remy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's such an interesting position because it may not be a high priority at this time because it's the position we don't need until we already needed it. With that said, I do appreciate consistency. And so we do have this redundant issue here, as Councillor Chenoweth pointed out a couple weeks ago, where we had a couple positions where we were saying we couldn't do this, but we could do this. And this is, I think, an example of what he was talking about relatably, that, we've had discussion tonight. I have made specific comments tonight about not funding positions without, having long-term planning for them. And so I do feel that this falls in line with that. And I really hope that as a community, we don't wait too long to fund this position. I hope it's not I wish we would have at some point. I do. It is something we have heard about for years. Thank you.
And Kelly, go ahead.
I was under the impression that the reason we were hiring this person, I realized that the hope is it will be continuous, and if it is, then yeah, it probably should be under core services. But I thought there was some initial work that needed to be done, and that was the purpose of putting it into the ARPA dollars. Am I incorrect in that assumption?
Jeff?
So there were really two positions in the initial ARPA list. This position you're talking about now and the position for the facilities manager that the budget committee pulled from consideration a couple of weeks ago. They are seen as significant gaps in the organization. Funding support for resiliency and infrastructure is a core mission of the ARPA funds. It seemed to us that recommending jumpstarting those programs was an appropriate use of the funds. The council clearly has the discretion to say, no, we're not going to jumpstart those programs with the funds. And so you will see them come back in one form or another, whether or not ARPA is part of the formula.
Thank you, Jeff. From my perspective, I've been the one on council and as mayor that's represented the city at the county level when it comes to emergency management. And I can tell you that every meeting I go to, how embarrassed I am because we don't have the focus. We don't have a plan in place when it comes to emergency management. I have seen smaller communities, and specifically I've seen Mac Water and Light take a huge step in the last 2 years because they've got more focus. And I think right now we're riding on the shirt tails of the county, and the county, from my perspective, they do a great job, but they're not as proactive because it's a larger group and they're not running emergency management in the city. So again, my thought, even though I'm not going to be voting, would be it is a critical issue that for the last 7 years I have been very, very embarrassed because of our lack of focus. I've shared this with Jeff so many times, and I just know how unprepared we would be for a disaster at this particular time. Okay, any other comments? With that being said, we have in front of us a resolution or an amendment to Resolution 2021-54 to remove the emergency management position. And so we have it's been moved by Adam and is seconded by Chris. I think just given the tenure of where we're at, could you poll the council, Claudia, so that we know where everyone is?
Absolutely, Mayor. Councilor Garvin?
Yes.
Councilor Geary?
Nay.
Councilor Minke?
Nay.
Councilor Chenoweth?
Yes.
Councilor Peralta?
No.
Council President Drapkin?
Aye.
And Mayor Hill?
Yeah, I said he didn't get the vote, and I would say no. Okay, we have now moved past the amendment to the resolution. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then I would ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2021-54 as presented to the council by the budget committee.
So moved.
So moved. Oh, second.
It has been moved by Zach and seconded by Kelly. All of those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. And all those opposed indicate by saying nay. From my count, resolution number 2021-54 passes unanimously 6-0. Thank you for your participation in this. That takes us to our second resolution this evening, which is resolution 2021-55, a resolution of the Common Council of the City of Mcminnville preliminarily adopting certain sustainable funding sources. And so we will call on our finance director, Jennifer, to present. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Hello, everyone. So I do not have a formal presentation for you all. The staff report, what I can relate is introduction is similar to what the city manager discussed in terms of the other resolution. We've been discussing with the complete budget committee a series of options for creating a more sustainable funding base for city services over the course of the summer and into the fall. And at the October 20th meeting of the budget committee, there was a vote to recommend the suite of revenue sources that was 12-1 of the 13 members of the budget committee who were present that evening. In terms of what I'd like to call out and for next steps is there has been, since the last discussion, some meeting already in terms of what a potential business license program might look like. So if you have questions about that, I believe Heather or Jeff has been more involved than I have been and can help answer anything there. Then secondarily, one thing I did fail to note in the staff report is that in earlier discussions at the budget committee of the municipal fee associated with utilities, that is one of the primary revenue sources that is on the resolution before you. There was discussion of wanting to include a time frame for reviewing the program. And so within the resolution, there is that noted that in X time frame that we would analyze the program and what's gone well and what hasn't. So I wanted to draw your attention to that you may want to discuss that detail so that we can fill in at what number of years you might want to direct staff to assure that the program is a formal review is made of the resources that we will be gathering through a municipal fee, presuming you all move forward with the proposal. So that is all I have. And we're open for questions, or I don't know, Jeff, anything else to frame this up?
Thank you, Jennifer. Just before we go to questions, just sort of discrete next steps for each of the 4 categories that are identified in the resolutions. We have already contracted with Deb Gallardi, our rate consultant for wastewater fees, who will be bringing forward discussion and options for the council to consider for a utility-based fee. We expect that early in the calendar year. And again, that presentation from the rate consultant will be accompanied by the context provided by some core services funding examples that we're working on at the staff level. Our staff recommendation is, presuming that this resolution passes, that we would subsequently bring back to you a recommendation to form a task force to review and make recommendations regarding a business license program. We would move forward with our SDC reviews, but each of those would follow the various infrastructure master plan updates that are in the queue, and ongoing cost recovery measures would be brought to you periodically as they currently are. Thank you for the additional time.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's go to Adam and then Sal.
Yeah, I don't know if this would be Jeff or Jennifer, but as far as the business license goes, instead of bringing on a half-time FTE, has there been any talk? I know in the staff report it mentions talking with the chamber executives, but as far as delegating the management of the business license, it seems like it'd be more in the purview of MEDP, but really with any of our partners from MDA to visit Mcminnville or the chamber, it just seems that might be more efficient than bringing on another city staffer to just manage this program.
I would, if the council supports the resolution and establishes a task force, I would assume that those kinds of issues would be among those explored and ultimately recommended by the task force. So we don't have a specific recommendation for you on a program or how to implement it, but we would look to that task force to help us with that work.
Yeah, so, and if I can just follow up on that, Councilor Garvin, the survey that the chamber sent out with the 4 different scenarios, that's actually 4 scenarios that were developed 4 years ago by the stable table when we were initially talking about the business license fee. It's not something that we're recommending at this point in time. We do think that it should be a discussion through a task force that talks about the best way to approach this. When it was discussed as a stable table 4 years ago, it was the other partners who felt the city was the best place for that to be put, because they all have specialty membership programs and are reflecting on those. So it will be something that we should, if we want to move forward with a program, that we should continue to explore and dialogue.
Okay, thank you, Heather, and thank you, Jeff.
Sal?
Thank you, Mayor. Question for Amanda and for Jeff. Actually, I have a couple of questions, but the first one is, what is the legal significance, if any, to the phrasing in the resolution that we preliminarily adopt something that we're later going to have to vote on? And what was the rationale for presenting it in that way?
So I'll let Amanda weigh in on this as well. From my perspective, I think it was important to sort of refine and acknowledge the recommendation from the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee can only make recommendations to the council. We aren't really in a staff position able to do work at the direction of the Budget Committee, with the exception of the adoption of the budget. And so we need some council direction to sort of refine our staff level efforts. And this would essentially be, the way I would interpret this resolution is it would direct us to continue to work on each of these issues as we've outlined in detail in the staff report. And in terms of any additional legal impact or nuance, I would defer to Amanda to explain.
Yeah, actually, what Jeff said was essentially what I was going to say as well. For us to be able to implement this program, there will need to be additional council approval. This is merely a point to say, yes, keep moving forward. For example, talking about the consultant Deb Gallardi, entering into that contract and really starting to explore the different potential options of what a utility fee may look like. Is a significant amount of time. It's also resources that we will be dedicating to that. So we want to staff wants to make sure that council feels this is a track to move forward with, which is why we're asking for the preliminary approval, obviously subject to a final approval of an actual plan to implement an actual program.
Thank you. So, So I support the concept of the service fee. I'm not sure about the business license, just because the models that I've heard that seem to have some support in the business community is kind of a de minimis license that allows us to maintain kind of a record of who all the lawful businesses are in the city. And there seem to be a fair amount of businesses that support that idea. There seems to be a significant amount of pushback on the idea of a business license being a significant revenue generator for the city. And the models that I heard from staff seem to suggest that it really wasn't going to be a very large, generator of revenue. So I'm a little more nuanced on where I'll be on that. And that's one of the reasons why I have a lot of discomfort with preliminarily approving anything. Whereas I think I'd be a lot more comfortable with something like, if you were to go to the resolution clauses of the resolution after the be it therefore resolved section, instead of the council hereby preliminarily adopts, maybe, direct staff to set up a work group to do these. And if there's a way to be a little less neutral in the language than that, I just am not comfortable saying that I approve something that I haven't seen the final details on, even preliminarily.
Thank you, Sal.
Actually, to finish that thought, the third and fourth sections of that did seem to be a little less definitive, and I had less discomfort with points 3 and 4. It was 1 and 2 and the way that those were worded. If we can change the wording a little bit on those, I could get to yes if we could do it along the way that I just suggested.
And Sal, so using verbiage such as found in 3 and 4, if we could incorporate that in 1 and 2, you would feel more comfort. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, Mayor. It's simply because, if we don't know what the final proposal is going to be, so indicating support for that, I just have a hard time getting there. But the idea, but I'm very supportive of giving the direction that these are the areas that we're going to look for new revenue, particularly 1, 3, and 4, and I'm a little less excited about 2.
Thanks for that clarification. Any other comments from councilors?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead, Zach.
Thank you. Sal, if I may engage you on that, I get what you're saying, but in my head, process-wise, I don't fully. If you change, let's just, for instance, change the language after the council on 1 and 2 to follow along the lines of the next few words after the council as 3 and 4 do. I don't understand how that changes our outcome. The staff's going to bring us back same or similar things, and we're going to move forward on that. So I'm a little at a loss of sort of getting behind that. I get what you're pulling at, but I don't think it changes any of our outcomes. And I also think that we've had a lot of time to work on this. We got to get staff going on, especially number 1. I understand we have more work to do on number 2, which is a business license, but number 1, we're coming up on starting the next budget planning, and we've gotta go and get them a clear path for adequately staffing and avoiding furloughing for the next year, and in investing and infusing life and energy into our programming. And so, changing the wording, I don't know if I'm going to fully get behind it. But if you help me figure out how that's going to change the outcome, to understand where you're coming from, or not.
Thanks, Zach. If that was directed at me, it may very well be a pedantic objection on my part. I just feel like it's, and you may be right. I do think you're right on point 1. I think, the direction seems to be that we're moving there. I guess I'm interested in hearing what other people have to say and whether there's a similar discomfort as I had.
Amanda has her hand up. Amanda?
Yeah, Councilor Peralta, as I was sitting here thinking about your point a little bit more, I think also one of the things that, and maybe this is the distinction between 1 versus 2, and perhaps the language in 2 could be revised to be similar to 3, is that another item here is that Mcminnville Water and Light is going to have to be a partner. Well, in all likelihood, will need to be a partner in the utility fee. So having a statement from the council to move this forward, I think Jennifer indicated that there's about a 6-month lead time minimum needed for implementation for Mcminnville Water and Light. So also being able to communicate to our partners that we need to move forward with some of that implementation, those implementation items is a pretty key thing. But I could see a scenario where maybe there's a proposal to change some of the language, particularly in 2, to be similar to 3, if that is a motion you would like to make.
That would I think, address the core of my concerns, and thank you for the suggestion.
Before we take any motion or amendment to the motion, I'd like to, in that we, on a resolution 2021-54, open it up for public comment also, so that we're in following the same format this evening. So I will open it up for any public comment. And Claudia, do we have any public comment?
Yes, Mayor and Council, we have Mark Davis signed up.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't start my video yet, but now I can. Okay, there I am. Thank you for the opportunity to address you on this issue. Once again, I'm generally supportive of what's come forward. I was kind of thinking along the lines that Councilor Peralta mentioned earlier, that we need to professionalize, and when he was talking about the fire department. And I really think that the community has reached a point where the city is changing. And I'm not sure that the council has really had a discussion with the citizens and explained where we're going here. And I think that the way we've done things in the past, with volunteers and make and do and repairing things, and we're headed in a different direction right now. And I really think that, the council owes the community a discussion. I think some of the new people that have moved to town understand that. They've come from other communities or are used to having, professional staff handling everything. But I think a lot of the old timers, people who've been here for a while, are kind of going, what's going on here? Why are you raising taxes and fees and all these other things? So I really think that the council should be, having better communication with the citizens. As far as the recommendations themselves, I think the SDCs are long overdue to be raised. I mean, this is one of the old things that we always, the developers, that's too expensive. We want to keep the housing cheap. And now our fees are a third or a quarter of what other cities are charging. And, people are, selling $500,000 houses now, and they're paying these $8,000 SDCs. That's ridiculous. I mean, somebody's making that up. And I'm going to write something about that. You'll see that eventually. But the other thing I'm kind of mystified about is this utility fee. We already have a utility fee. It's called a franchise fee. It's a percentage. And it seems to me like that we ought to be able to just increase that percentage rather than hiring consultants and figuring out all this other stuff. I mean, I tried to look online to figure out whether the franchise fee could be raised, and it's not clear to me whether it can or not. I'm not a lawyer, so I may be totally out of line by saying you could raise it 6% to 7% or 8% or whatever you need to get it, because it's going to take a lot of time for water and light. You're going to get charged a bunch of money and all that. But the other concern I have, and I've raised this before, and I know you're tired of hearing it, but we have that franchise fee, but we're only charging half that rate, the 6%, only 3% to Cascade Steel and Airgas. And I personally don't think that's fair, and we're going to go through a whole long equity thing on the new utility fee. But how can it be fair when the biggest users are paying less than the people at the bottom? And I really think that needs to be looked at along with the rest of what you're considering. So thank you very much for listening to my comments.
Thank you, Mark. Claudia, any other public comment?
Sorry, was waiting to unmute myself. No one else has signed up.
Thank you, Claudia. Let's go back up to Sal. Sal?
Thank you, Mayor. I was under the impression that the work that we're doing on the utility fee included a rate review, or was intended to include a rate review on both Air Liquide and Cascade Steel. Am I mistaken in that perception, is this a different fee that we're talking about?
No, we've asked Deb Gallardi to do a full review.
And that's germane to this specific budget item?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I see no other hands, so I will ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2021-55 as presented by the Budget Committee.
So moved. Oh.
I was Councilor Minke has her hand up, Mayor. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, second, if you haven't already got one.
Okay, so it has been moved by Zach and seconded by Kelly Minke. All those in favor, please signify by saying.
We want to do some discussion.
Go ahead, Chris.
I just didn't know if we ever came to a conclusion on Sal's point. Did we change the wording or did we not change the wording in number 2?
We did not.
Not as we sit right now, Chris.
And Sal, that's where you want it to be.
I can live with it. I mean, it may have been a pedantic point. I'm a little uncomfortable with, pre-approving resolutions.
Well,
I would have devil's argument with you on that. I mean, I'm going to be a no vote on this anyway, so it seemed kind of pointless for me to back you up. But I agree with you. I can't understand why we would want to be so definitive on something that's.
I guess the point that kind of won me around on not messing with it was Amanda's point that this will send a clear signal to Mac Water and Light that that's one place where we feel like we should be looking for revenue. So that was, I thought, the strongest argument. And I just want to be clear, particularly with regard to the business license, I may very well be a no on that. I'm not pre-approving. I'm not pre-approving that. So I'm fine with the resolution as presented, just to move us on. But I may very well be a no on one or more parts of it later.
Yeah, I mean, MDA's letter was pretty strong on that. And again, I wanted to make sure that you weren't being ignored. So perfect.
Thank you, Sal. Thank you, Chris. We have on the table resolution number 2021-55, moved by Zach and seconded by Kelly. Again, just for clarity tonight, Amanda, could you poll the council so that we can truly see where people sit on this?
I'll turn it over to Claudia to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me, Amanda. Claudia.
Councilor Garvin?
Aye.
Councilor Geary?
Aye. Thanks, Amanda.
Councilor Minke?
Aye.
Councilor Chenoweth?
Nay.
Councilor Peralta?
Aye.
Council President Drapkin?
Aye.
Thank you. Resolution number 2021-55 passes 5-1 in favor. And so, again, the resolution passes this evening. Thank you for all of your hard work. We will now adjourn our regularly scheduled council meeting. It is 9:02, and we will move over to executive session. Thank you, everyone.